My dear students, after reading this newspaper, I realized that 80% of the crime committed involve use of mobile in today's cyber world. Globally, the cybercrime currently cost approximated $4 trillion to us. This gruesome fact about alarming incidents of cybercrime make me share the golden words of author of future studies John Naisbitt as, "We are drowning of information, but we are starved of knowledge." This is the reality of time. Now, in today's session, which is titled as Cybercrime Cases, we will be covering several topics. Number one is an overview of spread of cybercrime, why a person commits cybercrime, what is the main motive, what are the leading cases of cybercrime in India. We have to also see the global scenario as we are globally connected in today's world. We will be discussing various cases at global level. At the last, we will be talking about general precaution and conclusory part. The 20th century has brought us to reality of the idea of global village, where digital technology has interconnected and enmeshed the world economics, culture and population. India is no exception. With second largest internet population in the world, while greater connectivity via the World Wide Web promise large scale progress, it also leaves our digital societies open to new vulnerabilities. Cybercrime cases know no borders and evolve at a pace at par with emerging technologies. There are high number of cybersecurity expenses in India because of security threats. India's banking, financial services and insurance sector had the highest expenditure on cybersecurity, announcing to over $500 million in 2019 itself. This was estimated to go up to over $800 million by 2022. The information technology and service sector came second with cybersecurity expenses worth over $430 million in 2019. Over $1.9 billion were collectively spent on cybersecurity by various business sectors across India in 2019. My dear students, it was estimated that these expenses would reach over $3 billion by 2022. Thus, in a nutshell, the IT services sector in India had the highest share of expenditure towards cybersecurity. It was estimated that the sector's cybersecurity expenses would grow at the rate of 18% between 2019 and 22. And banking and financial services and insurance sector came second with a 16.1% growth rate of cybersecurity expense in the given time period. Now, let us go back to the basics about today's session. Today, we will be covering various live cases. A case method is one of the most enriching learning experience that we all are going to have in this session. Teaching with case studies has expanded extensively and it has shown that this methodology is a very good manner for the learner to maintain the given knowledge and challenge themselves in more than one way. Teaching with cases opens up the walls of curiosity of decision making, problem solving, discussion and much more. The case method of learning is rich in detail, which allows the students learn not only theoretical concept but practical concept in different case situation in real life. Before discussing live cases, let us discuss landmark cases of cybercrime reasons for the commissioning of the same. Why crime starts? Crime starts from brain. It all starts from here. There are so many motives to start the crime. Number one motive is economic motive. Money is a major motivator for many cyber criminals. Cyber criminals to change in malware, phishing, identity theft, fraudulently money request, attack to make money fraudulently. Cyber criminals often use cryptocurrency for small transactions or wire transfer for greater amount. Business Week estimates that cyber crime tragic online banking account make nearly $700 million per year globally, and that is just one kind of cyber crime. Other motives are personal. Cyber criminals are often motivated due to personal emotions and commit essentially crime of passion committed over the internet. From an angry employee installing a virus on office computer or a stalker hacking into someone's social media account are some personally motivated cyber crimes. Third category of crime is regarding ideology. Some cyber crimes are committed for believed, ethical, ideological or moral reasons, as happened when financial companies like Visa, MasterCard and PayPal refused to let account and cardholder to make contribution to the controversial non-profit organization. An activists group Anonymous sent a series of bot attacks on the financial company's server as a revenge. Cyber crimes due to competition in the market. It is done by the corporates, which is a very unethical practice. Various cyber crimes are committed due to competition in industries and getting into manufacturing system, which is highly valuable for IP, blackmails, competitive intelligence, etc. These crimes are usually committed in industries with complex intellectual property at their core. For example, technology and pharmaceutical companies. There are a category where crimes are committed by political motives, which is growing tool used to achieve political ends. It is used to manipulate election or distribute ransomware. Many companies, especially social networking sites, use personal information and data of its user and use this information to influence political views of the people. And it is highly used and in the political agenda of the time. Now, if we discuss cases, we are doing it as per the chronology. India saw its first cybercrime conviction in 2001. It all began after a complaint was filed by Sony India Private Limited, which runs a website called www.sonysambandh.com, targeting non-resident Indians. The website enables NRI to send Sony products to their friends and relatives in India after they pay it online. The company undertakes to deliver the product to the concerned recipient. But in May 2002, according to the cybercrime case study, someone logged onto the website under the identity of Barbara Campa and ordered a Sony color television and a cordless headphone set. She gave her credit card number for payment and requested the product to be delivered to Arif Azim in Noida. The payment was duly cleared by the credit card agency and the transaction was processed. After following the relevant procedure of due diligence and checking, the company delivered the item to Arif Azim. At the time of delivery, company took digital photographs showing the delivery being accepted by Arif Azim. The transactions closed at that time, but after 1.5 months, the credit card agency informed the company that it was an unauthorized transaction as the real owner had denied having made the purchases. It was a surprise to the company. The company lodged a complaint about online cheating at the Central Bureau of Investigation (CBI), which registered a case under section 418, 419 and 420 under IPC. The matter was investigated and Arif Azim was arrested. Interestingly, investigation revealed that Arif Azim, while working at the call center in Noida, gained access to the credit card number of an American national, which he misused on the company's site. The CBI recovered the color television and the cordless headphone by him. In this one-of-a-kind cyber fraud case, it was the very first case of India. In this matter, the CBI had evidence to prove their case, and so the accused admitted his guilt as well. The court convicted Arif Azim under various sections of IPC, but this being the first time the cybercrime convicted, the court felt that the accused was a young boy of 24 years and first time convict. A lenient view needed to be taken, and therefore, he was released. The accused was on probation for just 1 year. The judgment is of immense significance for the entire nation. Besides, this is the first conviction in a cybercrime matter in India. It has shown that the IPC can be effectively applied to certain categories of cybercrime which are not covered under IT Act 2000. Secondly, a judgment of this sort sends out to a clear message to all that the law cannot be taken for a right. Now, interesting case is case number 2, and this is a case on personal motive, not on financial motive. Now, the title of the case is State of Tamil Nadu versus Suhas Kutty. Now, what happened in this case? The Suhas Kutty is notable for the fact that conviction was achieved successfully within a relatively period of 7 months, in a very short period of time from filing of the FIR by the person who was the victim in this case, making it one of the notable cyber law case in India. Considering the similar cases have been pending in other states for a much longer time. The efficient handling of the case, which happened to be the first case of Chennai cybercrime cell going to trial, deserve a special mention here. The case is related to the posting of obscene, defamatory and annoying message about a divorced woman in the Yahoo Messenger group. Emails were also forwarded to the victim for information by accused through a false email account opened by him in the name of the victim herself. The posting of the message resulted in annoying phone calls to the lady in the belief that she was soliciting and posting those defamatory messages. Based on the complaint made by the victim on February 2004, the police traced the accused to Mumbai and arrested him within next few days. The accused was a known family friend of the victim and was reportedly interested in marrying her. She, however, married another person. This marriage later ended in the divorce, but the accused started contacting her once again. On her reluctance to marry him, the accused took up the harassment through the internet. On 24th March 2004, a charge sheet was filed under Section 67 of the IT Act 2000, Section 469 and 509 of Indian Penal Code before the Honorable Magistrate. The Honorable Magistrate Egmore cited 18 witnesses and 34 documents and material objects. Witnesses were examined and entire documents were marked as exhibits. The defences argued in these cybercrime cases that the offending emails would have been given either by the ex-husband of the complainant or the complainant herself to implicate the accused, as accused alleges to have turned down the request of the complainant to marry her. Further, the defense counsel argued that some of the documentary evidence was not sustainable under Section 65B of Indian Evidence Act. However, the court relied upon the expert witnesses and other evidence produced before it, including the witness of cyber cafe owner, and came to the conclusion that the crime was proved. Additional Chief Metropolitan Magistrate Egmore delivered the judgment on 5th November 2004 as follows. The accused is found guilty of offence under Section 469 and 509 of IPC and Section 67 of IT Act 2000. And the accused is convicted and sentenced to the offence to undergo rigorous imprisonment for 2 years under Section 469 IPC and to pay a fine of ₹500, and for the offence under Section 509 IPC, sentenced to undergo 1 year simple imprisonment and to pay a fine of ₹500, and for the offence under Section 67 of the IT Act 2000 to undergo rigorous imprisonment for 2 years and to pay a fine of ₹4,000. All three sentences to run concurrently to the punisher. Now, the accused paid the fine amount and he was lodged at the Central Prison, Chennai. This is considered as the first case convicted under Section 67 of IT Act 2000 in India, and it has opened door to the so many harassed women who were harassed in the similar practices, and it was a big winning of the females against harassment. Case number 3 is about children's. A juvenile was involved, and juvenile found guilty for sending threatening emails. A 16-year-old student from Ahmedabad who threatened to blow up Andheri railway station in an email message was found guilty. Very much shocking. The crime is committed by only 16-year-old boy, and the guilty was found by the juvenile court in Mumbai. A private news channel received an email on 18th March 2008 claiming sender as a gang, saying a bomb would be planted on the unspecified train to blow it up. The case was registered in Andheri police station under Section 506 of IPC and transferred to Cybercrime Investigation Cell. During investigation, CCIC, often called as Cybercrime Investigation Cell, traced the cyber cafe from which the email account was created and threatening emails was sent. Cafe owner told police about friends which had come that day to surf the net. Police summoned them and found that the system which was used to send email was accessed by only one customer that day. On 22nd March 2008, police arrested the boy of a class 12th science student who during interrogation said that he sent the mail for the fun of having this prank flashed as breaking news on the television. This case makes us warn that technology should be rightly used by matured mindset, and when you give technology to the kids or the person who are not major of age, you should be very careful and you should be very disciplined also. Now, case number 4 is a classical case of Nigerian lottery. We all receive SMS on mobile that you have become Karodpati. This case belongs to that specific facts only. The 2 Nigerians sentenced 7 years rigorous imprisonment for online fraud to a local court in Malappuram district in Kerala, and sentenced 2 Nigerians to 5 years rigorous imprisonment on July 20, 2011 in a cybercrime case. The 2 had cheated a doctor in the district of Malappuram, and the cheating was of ₹30 lakh. Johnson and Michael, both hailing from Anambra state in Nigeria, were sentenced each under section 420 for 5 years and 468, that is forgery of IPC for 5 years again, and under 66D, that is phishing crime of IT Act 2000. They were convicted and got imprisonment of 2 years and a fine of rupees 1.25 lakhs by a chief judicial magistrate of Malappuram district. The sentence ran concurrently. According to the charges filed by Karyapur police, the DO had cheated the Dr. Thomas from Malapur district after they have sent an email asking to pay rupees 30 lakh as a processing fee to become a crorepati. But a planned move by the police and the doctor succeeded when the Nigerians were lured into the Kerala in March 2010. They were then arrested by the Karyapur police. The strong evidence based on which the prosecution presented the case became crucial in the first verdict against financial fraud under IT Act 2000. Again, this was a great incidence for IT world and for IT fraternity to make ethical environment for IT practices in India. Now, case number 5 is a technical case which I have included to understand that there could be a conflict between IPC and IT Act as well, and the person took benefit of doubt also in this case. This case was of Sharad Babu Digumurthy versus Government of NCT of Delhi. The conflict between provision of the IPC and IT Act came into the foray in this case. On November 27, 2004, an obscene video had been listed for sale on Bazi.com. The listing was intentionally made under the category of books and magazine and subcategory e-books in order to avoid its detection by the filters installed by Bazi. A few copies were sold before the listing was deactivated. Later, Delhi Police Crime Branch charge sheeted Avinash Bajaj, the managing director of Bazi.com, and Sharad Digumurthy, Bazi's manager. The company Bazi was not arraigned as an accused, and this helped Avinash Bajaj get off the hook, since it was held that vicarious liability could not be fastened on Avinash Bajaj under either section 292 of IPC or section 67 of IT Act, when Avinash employer Bazi itself was not an accused. Later changes under section 67 of IT Act and section 294 of IPC against Sharad Digumurthy was also dropped, but the charges under section 292 of IPC were retained. The Supreme Court then considered it if after the charges under section 67 of the IT Act was dropped, a charge under section 292 of the IPC could be sustained. The Supreme Court quashed the proceeding against Sharad Digumurthy and ruled that if an offence involved an electronic record, IT Act alone would apply. Since such was a legislative intent, it is a settled principle of interpretation that special law would prevail over general laws and later laws would prevail over prior legislation. Further, section 81 of the IT Act states that the provision of IT Act shall have effect notwithstanding anything inconsistent therewith contained in any other law for the time being in force. The CEO was later released on bail. This opened up the question as to what kind of distinction we draw between internet service provider and content provider. The burden rests on the accused that he was the service provider and not the content provider. It also raised a lot of issue regarding how the police should handle cybercrime cases, and later on protocols were developed to deal with such kind of cases. Now, let us move to case number 6. This is a corporate crime using IT technologies. This is a case of Pune of Citibank Emphasis Call Center. What happened in this case? An ex-employees of BPO arm of Emphasis Limited, M-Source, defrauded US customer of Citibank to the tune of rupees 1.5 crores. It was one of those cybercrime cases that raised concern of many kind, including role of data protection. The crime was obviously committed using unauthorized access to the electronic account space of the customers. It is therefore firmly within the domain of cybercrime IT Act 2000, and it is versatile enough to accommodate the space of crime not covered by IT Act 2000, but covered under other law like IPC. And with the use of electronic document can be considered as a crime with the use of a written document as well. Cheating, conspiracy, breach of trust, etc. are therefore applicable in the above cases in addition to sections of IT Act 2000. Under IT Act 2000, the offence is recognized both under section 66 and section 43. Accordingly, the person involved are liable for imprisonment and fine both, as a liability to pay damages to the victim to the maximum extent of rupees 1 crore per victim, for which the adjudication process can be invoked. The amount of fine is very high, 98,000, because of financial loss is huge. Now, there is a famous case, Bank NSP case. In this, one of the leading cybercrime cases in the banking industry, where a management trainee of the bank was engaged to be married. The couple exchanged many emails using the company's email ID and company system, because the person was employed in a company, and in the working hours they used to send mail to each other. After some time, the two broke up, and then the girl cheated and sent fraudulent email IDs such as Indian Bar Association and sent email to the boy's foreign client. She used the bank's computer to do this kind of crime. The boy's company lost a large number of clients and took the bank to the court, because when the complaint was lodged, the bank ID was traced. The bank was held liable for the emails sent using the bank system. Then they have not protected their intranet properly, and girl was also punished accordingly. There is an interesting case of an SMC Pneumatics India Private Limited versus Jogesh Quatra. It is a very unique case, and it is based on personal motive. In India's first case of cyber defamation as well. This is a very nice case to listen to. The High Court of Delhi assumed jurisdiction over a matter where a corporation's reputation was being defamed through emails and passed an important ex parte injunction. The court took initiative to pass ex parte injunctions to protect the company's image. Amongst the many cyber cases in India, in this case, the defendant Jogesh Quatra, being an employee of the plaintiff company, started sending derogatory, defamatory, obscene, vulgar, filthy and abusive emails to his employers as also to different subsidiaries of the said company all over the world. And his main aim was to defame the company and its managing director, Mr. R.K. Malhotra. The plaintiff filed a suit against this, and the plaintiff applied for permanent injunction restraining the defendant from doing these illegal acts or sending derogatory emails to the plaintiff. Now, what happened in this case? On behalf of the plaintiff, it was contended that the emails sent by the defendant were distinctly obscene, vulgar, abusive, intimidating, humiliating and defamatory in nature. The counsel further argued that the aim of sending the said email was to malign the high reputation of the plaintiff all over India and the world. He further contended that the act of the defendant in sending the emails had resulted in an invasion of the legal right of the plaintiff. Further, the defendant is under a duty not to send aforesaid emails. It is pertinent to note that after the plaintiff's company discovered that the said employee could be indulging in the matter of sending abusive emails, and plaintiff terminated the service of the defendant. After hearing detailed argument of counsel for plaintiff, Honorable Judge of the Delhi High Court passed an ex parte interim injunction, observing that the prima facie case had been made out by the plaintiff. Consequently, in this cyber fraud case in India, the Delhi High Court restrained the defendant from sending such message further to hurt to the plaintiff or to the subsidiary all over the world, including their managing director and their sales and marketing departments. The Honorable Judge also restrained the defendant from publishing, transmitting or causing to be published any information in the actual world as also in cyber space which is derogatory or defamatory to or abusive. Now, this order of Delhi High Court assumes tremendous significance, as this is the first time that an Indian court assumes jurisdiction in a matter concerning over cyber defamation and grants an ex parte injunction restraining the defendant from defaming the plaintiff by sending derogatory, defamatory, abusive and obscene emails either to the plaintiff or the subsidiaries. Now, this is a classical case of maintaining the image of the company. Now, let us come to the interesting case, that is NASSCOM versus Ajay Sood and others. In a landmark judgment in the case of National Association of Software and Service Companies versus Ajay Sood and others delivered in March 2005, the Delhi High Court declared phishing on the internet to be an illegal act, in this entailing an injunction and recovery of damages. A cybercrime case study had been conducted also on the same, elaborating on the concept of phishing. In order to lay down a precedent in India, the court stated that it is a form of internet fraud where a person pretends to be legitimate association such as a bank or an insurance company, in order to extract personal data from a customer such as access codes, password, etc. Personal data so collected by misinterpreting the identity of the legitimate party commonly used for collecting party's advantage. It is basically against the party. The court also stated by way of an example that typical phishing scam involves person who pretends to represent online banks and siphon cash from e-banking account after handing over confidential banking details in online environment. The Delhi High Court stated that even though there is no specific legislation in India to penalize phishing, it held phishing to be an illegal act by defining it under Indian law as misrepresentation made in the course of a trade, leading to confusion as to source and origin of the email, causing immense harm, not only to the consumer, but even to the person whose name, identity or password is misused. The court held the act of phishing as passing off and tarnishing the plaintiff's image. The plaintiff in this case was the National Association of Software and Service Companies, often regarded as NASSCOM, India's premier software association. The defendants were operating a placement agency involved in headhunting and recruitment. In order to obtain personal data which they could use for purpose of headhunting, the defendants composed and sent email to third parties in the name of NASSCOM. The High Court recognized the trademark right of the plaintiff and passed an ex parte and interim injunction restraining the defendant from using the trade name NASSCOM or any other name deceptively similar to NASSCOM. The court further restrained the defendants from holding themselves out as being associated with or a part of NASSCOM. The court appointed a commission to conduct search at the defendants' premises as well. 2 hard disks of computer from which the fraudulent emails were sent by the defendants to various parties were taken into custody by the local commissioner appointed by the court. The offending emails were then downloaded from the hard disk and presented as evidence in the court. During the progress of the cyber law case in India, it became clear that the defendant in whose name the offending emails were sent were fictitious identities created by an employee on the defendant's instruction to avoid recognition and legal action. On discovery of this fraudulent act, fictitious names were deleted from the array of parties as defendants in the case. Subsequently, defendants admitted to their illegal act and the parties settled the matter through the recording of a compromise in the suit proceeding, in between the proceeding. According to the terms of compromise, the defendant agreed to pay a sum of rupees 1.6 million to the plaintiff as damage for violation of plaintiff's trademark right. The court also ordered that hard disk seized from the defendant's premises to be handed over to the plaintiff, who would be the owner of hard disk. Now, this case achieved very clear and great milestone. It brings the act of phishing into the ambit of Indian law even in the absence of specific legislation. It clears the misconception that there is no damage culture in India for violation of intellectual property rights. This case reaffirms intellectual property owners' faith in Indian judicial system's ability and willingness to protect intangible property right, and sends a strong message to intellectual property owners that they can do business in India without sacrificing their IP rights. Now, that is the reason why we have included IP and trademark law also in this module, the MOOC's title Information Security. Now, there is a very interesting case of cyber attack on Cosmos Bank. What happened in August 2018? The Pune branch of Cosmos Bank was drained of rupees 94 crores in an extremely bold cyber attack. By hacking into the main server, the thieves were able to transfer the money to a bank in Hong Kong. Along with this, the hackers made their way into the ATM server to gain details of various Visa and RuPay debit cards. The switching system, that is the link between centralized system and the payment gateways, was attacked, meaning neither the bank nor the account holder could notice the money being illegally transferred. According to the cybercrime case study internationally, a total of 14,000 transactions were carried out spanning across 28 countries using 450 cards. Nationally, 2,800 transactions using 400 cards were carried out in this case. This was one of its kind, and in fact, the first malware attack that stopped all communication between the bank and the payment gateway. After all these case examples, dear students, we must use cyber environment very nicely. There are few tips and techniques from me. and I would say prevention is better than cure. The Site Certification Security Initiative awareness training, conformance standards, adherence to policies like password policies, access control, email policy should be properly looked for. Periodic monitoring and reviews should be done of your system. Identification of exposure through education should be updated time to time. One should avoid disclosing any personal information to stranger via email or while chatting as well. One must avoid sending any photographs to a stranger by online, as misusing of photograph incidents increasing day by day. My dear students, I would like to give an example. There are various apps which scan your face and make you beautiful. They steal your photograph as well, which can be misused by the people, and you shouldn't use such kind of app in which you share your photograph. An updated antivirus software should be there to guard against virus attack, and it should be used by all netizens and should also keep backup volume so that no one may not suffer data loss in case of virus contamination. You should always take a backup of your important data. A person should never send his credit card number to any site that is not secured to guard against frauds. It is always the parents who have to keep a watch on the sites that your children are accessing to prevent any kind of harassment or deprivation in children. My dear student, I would like to quote the example of my daughter while she playing online game Ludo on mobile. There was a person with whom she interacted. My daughter was only 9 years old and the person was of mature age. Now he exchanged while playing game, he exchanged my contact number and he started sending messages to her, and I was really frightened that why she is communicating to the stranger. I immediately reported it and blocked that person. It is the responsibility of the website owner to adopt some policy for preventing cybercrime, as number of internet users are growing day by day. Web servers running public sites must be physically separately protected from internal corporate network. It is better to use the security programs by the body corporates to control information on sites. Now, the threat cyber crimes poses to us is not only our financial security, but also our personal security. Make sure your all accounts are protected with a unique password. Again, I am reinforcing it. You must use antivirus, and which has to be updated time to time. While browsing, double check URL what you are typing, and email address where you are sending. Finally, always follow the golden rule: when in doubt, don't click. If you follow these steps and work constantly to educate yourself against the threat we face in online environment, so that we all will be able to browse the web with peace. My dear students, wish you all a happy and safe browsing. Thank you so much.